Hello, friends of Studio Brule. This is Steve Brule, and it is coffee time. A little late for coffee today, but, well, we'll survive it. Welcome to the show, everybody. Michael Keller's here as usual. Thank you so much for the wonderful reminders, Michael. And thanks for joining me today, everyone. I'm going to start today, excuse me, I'm going to start today with a little bit of a follow-up from yesterday's session. So let's just have a look for here. Yesterday we were talking about the tsunami of hatred, and I think we also touched on the hate speech laws, and maybe it's the stakeholder capitalism. This is the one. It was 2 days ago, or rather 3 days ago, on the 31st of January, we talked about stakeholder capitalism. So that's the one I'm going to follow up a little bit on first. And then we're going to get into my view, and nobody's been surprised at that we need, the only cancel culture we really need is cancel this Great Reset. The Great Reset is not for the people of the world. It's for the super elite who already control the world. They are the ones planning the so-called Great Reset, and they are the ones to benefit from the so-called Great Reset. Yes, that was Wikipedia snippet says, yes, that's a picture of Chrystia Freeland. And Chrystia Freeland, who is the Finance Minister of Canada and the Deputy Prime Minister. Chrystia Freeland was a former journalist from the Ukraine. I think a freelance journalist at that. But he caught the fancy of Trudeau, who stacked his cabinet based upon gender. So Chrystia Freeland then ended up as Finance Minister of Canada, knowing nothing about finance. That might explain to you partly why Canada's debt went from, deficit, I should say, went from almost nothing to about $100 billion in 2020, as our dictator Trudeau took 100% personal control of the entire budget of the country. And the opposition parties just let him have it for 8 months. He asked for 12 months, but he only got 8 months. Chrystia Freeland, maybe it's a wise move of him to put an unexperienced person with no experience in finance as finance minister, because who is she to find out or to hold the prime minister back? Who is she even to know what's really going on with the budget? They don't have a budget, by the way. Canada did not produce a budget in 2020. They claimed it's all because of the so-called pandemic and the elite dictated lockdowns. How that means you can't create a budget, I don't know. But they use that as an excuse. And so the next budget is expected, I think, this spring. So we'll see if they actually come out with a budget. As far as it is right now, it's just Trudeau signing off whatever he wants, as far as I can tell. But I think that period ended, and I don't know how they're approving things now. They don't meet in Parliament, as far as I know. So let's get on with the cancel culture, and what I say, we should be canceling the Great Reset, the only thing worth canceling. So, starting out with this article that I found quite well written and useful, worth going over. A psychologist explains the unhealthy incentives behind cancel culture. Now this plays into the rise of the totalitarianism that's going on in the world. Now we talked about that in the tsunami of hate yesterday, and how that the left and they're pushing for, or rather promoting hatred, spreading hatefulness, is part and parcel of the whole socialist agenda, and it always goes that way. And we talked yesterday about how the socialist regimes hate, and totalitarian regimes hate the family, because the family is the nuclear unit, the one historically or traditionally defensive place where you could actually speak your mind and not be at risk at being thrown under the bus. We saw how that gets destroyed under socialism. We have children ratting on their parents today. Now we have neighbors ratting on neighbors and family members ratting on family members. It's all part and parcel of this hate kind of culture that we have rising with us. So let's read this article here and see what this psychologist has to say on this cancel culture. Psychologist explains the unhealthy incentive behind cancel culture. Jonathan Haidt, author of The Righteous Mind, says one of the marks of an open and civil society is that individuals are not afraid to share opinions. Well, you share an opinion today and you are canceled tomorrow. And this is from the Foundation for Economic Education. I've found that this website, fee.org, I think is the original, the main website name, has been writing on a lot of topics that don't look like they're about economic education, but they get a lot of insight in things. So it's a go-to website from so far what I've seen. Printed on January 21st this year, so only about 2 weeks ago or less than 2 weeks ago. Reading from the top with me, we have a few quotes from this article worth going over. And as usual, I like to recommend that you go and read the original articles, because I can't read the entire article through here. That would be a lot of time and not worth it really, because then you would have nothing to go to read and I would just be reading the entire article. Instead, I pick out a few interesting quotes that I think represent that give you a flavor for it, and we discuss it around those points. So reading from the top with me. If there was a video documentary every second of my life, you can bet it would contain some pretty stupid comments I've made over the years. I would also probably be reminded of some opinions I no longer believe. If you're being honest with yourself, yours likely would be equally cringe. Yeah, for certain, for me, I can certainly concur with that statement. Reading from the top. In 2016, then high school freshman Mimi Groves posted a video to Snapchat in which she used a racial slur. The video later circulated around her school, though it wasn't met with controversy at the time. 2016, that would be roughly 5 years ago. Fellow classmate, you guys might have heard of this. I apologize for going over old news. This came into the news not that long ago, probably not very long before this article was printed. Reading from the top. Fellow classmate Jimmy Galligan hadn't seen the footage until last year, when the two were seniors, 4 years after it first made the rounds at Heritage High School. Galligan had held on to the video made 4 years earlier and had chosen to celebrate Groves' admission to UT by blasting the footage to every major social media platform. You know where that's going. Make no mistake, the article continues, making racial slurs of any kind is demeaning and inappropriate behavior. But is one comment made 4 years prior enough to ruin the future of a teen who hadn't even entered adulthood yet? The court of public opinion said yes, without giving Groves any chance at redemption. Now, I'll be nitpicking here a little bit from the author, because this 2 or 3 times in the article, the author makes these kind of obvious statements. And to me, this is an indication of just how careful you have to be to say you don't condone this behavior today. Every time somebody wants to talk about something like someone who is, for instance, in this case, used a racial slur as a minor in high school and had it come back as an adult to ruin their lives, I mean, do we really have to keep saying this? Make no mistake, making racial slurs of any kind is demeaning and inappropriate behavior. Well, that goes without saying, but not today. There was a time when I remember memes going around and Donald Trump was accused of not disavowing white supremacists. And memes were going around suggesting that Donald Trump should be disavowing white supremacists basically all day, every day. I mean, have you disavowed this hour? in the last 10 minutes, have you? This is kind of what it's getting to. You can't start just talking about a topic without putting out these kind of disclaimers that you don't actually condone making racial slurs. I didn't think the author was condoning it in any manner. In fact, it was clear from the outset of this article that this author was not condoning the use of demeaning or racial slurs. But 2 or 3 times in the article, this author felt compelled to make it incredibly clear, unnecessarily detailed, that was it a she that wrote the article? I can't remember. But that the author did not condone the behavior that they were discussing. But this is part of the weirdness of our culture today. Whenever you try to discuss some topic, you have to say, oh, well, of course I don't condone that behavior, and you have to say it often, and you have to say it in no uncertain terms, when in fact there is no indication anywhere that the author actually did condone this behavior. But let's carry on. Today, those espousing any opinion that goes against woke rhetoric are ridiculed online, fired from their jobs, and some are banned from using popular social media platforms altogether, like Donald Trump, for instance. And in fact, I'm forgetting his name. Famous guy was kicked off Facebook just for briefly, but famous politician, I think it was Ron Paul, just today, and I think they reinstated him quickly. But this is the insanity of our time. You don't even, just for discussing a topic, you can get deplatformed, even if you don't condone it. So this is another way in which freedom of speech is being crushed from all sides. And freedom of speech, and I believe this as well, but I think I like the way that Jordan Peterson put it, freedom of speech is a safety valve that protects us from the consequence of angry people's blowing up. It's a safety valve to violence. If someone is prevented from expressing themselves in words, they are very likely one day to express themselves in violence. Do we have to relearn these lessons over and over again? It seems that people do want to take us back to the bloody past. The left do. Reading from the top, this virtue signaling, which is really just a means of proving to society how good and moral your views are, is only half of the equation, however. Cancel culture is also about personal destruction, which is obvious in Grove's situation, since Galligan didn't use this ammunition against her until the time was ripe for maximum harm. There's a pattern here amongst these lefties. They are creating cultural changes and laws that are weaponizing ordinary human behavior. In this case, they're weaponizing freedom of speech. They're calling it hate speech, and then once it's called an act of hatred, then you can rationalize utterly destroying that person's life. Because the act of hatred then, as lefties like to say, speech is violence. So now that's a violent person. And this is a horrible conflation of ideas. Speech is not violence. Speech may get other people to turn violent. That is a possibility. But still, the harms from freedom of speech are infinitely smaller than the harms that come from suppressing freedom of speech. As I've said in the past, I would rather someone with hatred in their heart to speak it out loud, then we know where that person is coming from. There's a likelihood that the person himself or herself, after blurting out hateful comments and hateful speech, will come to their senses maybe and regret what they said and change their minds. But they won't if their speech is throttled, if their speech is suppressed. What is likely to happen is that their ideas will fester in the darkness and explode somewhere violently. And this is the same thing that's happening with this Believe Her movement and the Me Too movement. Now we are giving ammunition to angry women to destroy a man's life based on her word. Her word, in many cases in court, is taken as evidence that the accused is guilty. This is an intolerable situation in any free society. In fact, you're not going to have a free society if we allowed this kind of things to continue. Reading from the top. Cancel culture has reached a level of personal vindictiveness where people go out of their way to find ways the things other people say could be construed as insensitive. Boy, did we ever see that with Trump. It's not like it's just cancel culture. It's the feminist control of our culture that has allowed this to grow and fester. The feminist control entire mainstream media. We have feminist control of segments of governments, of law schools. We have feminist jurisprudence. We have feminist control of the education system from top to bottom. We have businesses instituting feminist-style, feminist-oriented thoughts. We have entire governments, like in Canada, based on feminism, outwardly and openly calling themselves feminist. We had, in the early part of the pandemics, the feminists and the UN was saying that the only way to the Great Reset had to be a feminist reset. The recovery from the pandemic had to be a feminist recovery. Feminism as an ideology has taken over the world, and feminism is Marxism. Feminism is Marxism. Feminism is totalitarianism. Feminism is oppression. Let's read on. Reading from the top. We now live in an era where people are constantly looking over their shoulders or computer screens, worried that whatever opinion they post might make them victims of cancel culture. So there we have the mechanism of oppression of people's speech. And not just speech, it's oppression of people's thoughts. When people start to edit their speech on the fly and then second guess themselves, then they start very quickly after that to edit their thoughts. And once you start to repress your own thoughts, you're repressing your own growth, and you're heading down a very bad path. You're not going to grow as a human being. You have to, to be a healthy human being, I am convinced that you have to personally struggle with some of the ideas that our culture is trying to prevent us from even talking about. As an individual, you have to struggle around your ideas around racism, around sexism, around all kinds of issues that go on in the world. But if we can't talk about them, you can't openly, honestly express your ideas without the threat of being canceled, then you're going to edit your thoughts and you're going to suppress your thoughts, which ultimately means you suppress your growth as a human being. Let's read on. There is no opportunity to change one's mind, nor is there room to defend opinions you genuinely believe. And this is a huge problem for civil society. And I think it's a huge problem for individual human growth. But then again, all of these totalitarian socialist movements are put individualism as a bad thing. And it's the greater good of the community that always gets talked about. And as we discussed yesterday in the Tsunami of Hate, the greater good of society really means the greater good of the elite who pulled the strings. It's not for your and my greater good. No. The only way we can have actually a growth in society and growth as human beings if the emphasis is decidedly placed upon the individual. Individuals make up society. Healthy individuals make healthy societies. It doesn't work the other way around. Let's read on. But having the freedom to consider all opinions and decide what you genuinely believe is vital to the human experience and civil discourse. Yeah, and to personal growth. And we need human beings who grow personally throughout their lives in order to have a healthy society. Reading from the top. To foster I keep forgetting to expand this up here. Can you, if you guys can read that fine in the comments, just to mention that in the comments, or should I expand that speech up here a little bit? I'll just put this one a little bit bigger. To foster a world where ideas can be freely expressed, Pacific Legal Foundation will be hosting an event this Friday featuring Haidt that will examine the many ways free speech serves as a central tenet of innovation, community, and civil society, and how we can preserve and protect this fundamental value that makes our society so extraordinary. We've been contending here at Studio Brûlé, and it's why freedom of the speech has always been one of our two central issues. Freedom of speech, and I contend presumption of innocence, are two of the most important fundamental values that any society must have in order for anyone in society to have a good measure of freedom. If you don't have freedom of speech, you can't criticize those in power, and then you're going to on the road to totalitarianism, which is probably why the left have always been putting freedom of speech in their crosshairs since the beginning, because leftism is totalitarianism every single time. Presumption of innocence should be obvious to everybody, but it seems that our culture has forgot that too. Without presumption of innocence, only the most charismatic con artist is going to rule over all innocent people whenever they choose to, being able to pull off a charismatic accusation without evidence. It's only the presumption of innocence that protects us from tyrants, and freedom of speech, which is why these are the two main focuses of this channel. Let's read on. Without the ability to speak freely and consider all opinions, civil discourse cannot occur. In its absence, society as we know it will cease to exist, and the divides between us will grow. I can't add anything to that. That's absolutely right. So the next thing we're going to discuss here is our Finance Minister, Chrystia Freeland, and what's she doing at the World Economic Forum? Why is she so keen on pushing stakeholder capitalism, which is not correctly named? It should be stakeholder fascism, as we discussed on January 31st, 3 days ago. Now, reading from the top with me, National Post. National Post is one of Canada's few remaining level-headed newspapers who don't kiss our dictator, tyrant Trudeau's butt and cover his butt. So let's read from the top. Rupa Subramania says, Chrystia Freeland's side gig with the World Economic Forum is endangering Canadian democracy. The entire Great Reset, of course, controlled by the elite of the world, is threatening, endangering all the democracies of the world. That's their goal. They openly state that they want to usher in global socialism. So let's read this subtitle here. There's no need to invent conspiracy theories. The attempt by global elites to subvert local democracy is fully on and in plain view. This was printed just yesterday in the National Post. The National Post also prints Rex Murphy's opinions. Rex Murphy is a brilliant writer, amusing, entertaining, and insightful every single time. Okay, here's our Finance Minister. Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland at the World Economic Forum. I meant to read this bit here. This is from October 28th, 2020. She sits on the board of trustees of the World Economic Forum, which advocates stakeholder capitalism. This may be one of the reasons that Trudeau put Chrystia Freeland in as finance minister, because she has no finance experience. She probably has no understanding of capitalism. Why would she? She was a freelance journalist in the Ukraine. Well, let's carry on. Rubbing shoulders, reading from the top, at Davos with the world's rich, famous, and powerful was one of the inspirations for her 2012 book, plutocrats, the rise of the new global super-rich, and the fall of everyone else. This was before she got tapped by Trudeau to join the plutocrats and to be one of them. She was critical in those days. Let's read on. It's amazing how easily people can be bought for a little bit of money and a chance to sit at the table with the elites and pull strings on the regular work slave class that they're trying to create. Chrystia Freeland sees herself as one of the string pullers. Indeed, let's read at the top. Indeed, her book, Freeland, notes that an invitation to Davos marks an aspiring plutocrat's arrival on the international scene. Her own words. Read it again. Freeland notes that an invitation to Davos, which is the World Economic Forum, marks an aspiring plutocrat's arrival on the international scene. And what do we have? Chrystia Freeland has an invitation to Davos, meaning, in her own words, she's an aspiring plutocrat. In her own words, in her own book, printed in 2012. What do you know? The global elite don't especially enjoy the glare of publicity on their privileged lifestyles. So much so that Freeland wrote in a 2015 opinion piece in The Guardian, quote, "After my book, Plutocrats, was published in 2012, I was even, and I know this will shock you, disinvited to a Davos dinner party. If the doors of Davos were closing for Freeland, they swung wide open after her entry into politics in 2013. Let's read on here. This is a big one. I better expand this up for you to easier to read. Okay, reading from the top with me. Indeed, the one-time critic has enjoyed an apotheosis of sorts, and since 2019 has sat in the on the board of trustees of the World Economic Forum itself. Other members, and this is interesting, other members include Canada's own Mark Carney, former governor of the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England, Al Gore, former U.S. Vice President, Mukesh Ambani, India's richest individual, Larry Fink, head of BlackRock, the world's largest investment fund, and a slew of other bankers, CEOs, tycoons, and celebrities. Notably, Freeland is the only government minister presently on the board. Maybe because the elite of the world like Justin Trudeau's constant virtue signaling about the riches and the wonders of socialism and ushering in a socialist world and climate change and all of these other favored topics of the would-be tyrants of the world. So they put her in there. Read at the top again. These board memberships are far from symbolic. According to the World Economic Forum, the Board of Trustees, quote, act as guardians of its mission and values and are its highest level of governance body. Similarly, board members of the Aspen Institute Kiev are responsible for providing counsel to the president, as well as governance over the business affairs and property of the Institute. So Freeland's really up there. Reading from the top. What would happen, and remember, Freeland is the Finance Minister of Canada. She's up there in the World Economic Forum. She is there leading Western countries into socialism. She has a voice in Canada. She actually negotiated the free trade agreement between Canada, U.S., and Mexico. She was part of that, almost screwed it up when Trump was in power. But let's read on. What would happen if acting as a guardian for the World Economic Forum came into conflict with acting as a guardian for Canada's public finances, which is Freeland's day job? I wonder which one of these jobs is Freeland's day job. I'm starting to think the board of directors at the World Economic Forum is her real day job, because she has opened the purse strings of Canada up wide open, completely wide open. Let's read on. What would happen if providing counsel to the Aspen Institute president came into conflict with providing counsel to Canada's Governor General, which is part of Freeland's day job as a member of the Privy Council? So, being on the board of directors of the World Economic Forum and a member of the Privy Council, Finance Minister of Canada with responsibility for providing counsel to Canada's Governor General. These elites know how to pull strings, and they're pulling all the strings they can to usher in a one world government. Let's read this from the top. That's quite a journey from her beginnings as a freelance journalist working out of Ukraine. She catapulted right up there. It's very, very interesting. Let's read onwards. Like its first cousin, the Great Reset, which bizarrely aims to bring in environmental considerations under the purview of central banks. This is almost comical. They put a CEO of a investment firm, one of the biggest ones in the U.S., in control of the pandemic crisis management, indicating that really the pandemic is about money. And now they're putting the what is it here? The environmental considerations under the purview of the central banks. The central banks. So what are they preparing for? Like complete financial, using these issues for financial control of the world. The innocuous sounding stakeholder capitalism is committed to destroying the foundations of Anglo-American free market capitalism and replacing it with a system where governments and their cronies in Davos tell private businesses what they need to care about. And that's exactly what we talked about 3 days ago. They're putting finance people in charge of epidemic pandemics and climate change, not a scientist. And the reason is because they don't care about science. This is about changing the economy of the entire planet such that the small group of elites have all the strings and can pull all the strings. So let's carry on with the next topic now. Now I think, where did I have it here? Here we go. So this is going to shift gears a little bit. We see that in the short term, the rich of the world, the elite of the world, want a one world government. And I dealt with this in detail. There's a long history of this in human history, going back to the pharaohs and Genghis Khans and Roman emperors. All of these megalomaniac, powerful people sought to control the entire world with no square inch patch left unruled by them. This is the same thing that's in human nature and that's being played out today. The ultra wealthy of the world, they see themselves as the true emperors of earth, and they intend to bring it about. But that's the short-term goal, believe it or not. What's the long-term goal? Well, that's more complicated, I think. Let's read what Jeff Bezos is up to. Amazon's Jeff Bezos will pass CEO role to Andy Jassy as company reports record profits. Amazon's founder will remain as executive chairman. Jassy is currently head of Amazon Web Services and has been with the company since 1997. Now let's read on here. Amazon, okay, I think that's a repeat here. Let's skip ahead. Jassy is an experienced Amazon hand who started with the company in 1997. He shaped AWS from inception and was made head of the division in 2016. Reading from the top. He's also defended Amazon's development of facial recognition tools, saying governments should have access to the most advanced technology to keep their citizens safe. There's that 4-letter word, safe. This is the guy who's going to run Amazon, the entire company of Amazon. We shouldn't be surprised at that, really. This is just ordinary, everyday business for them. But he is the guy who defended Amazon's facial recognition tools. What are they? Well, we know what they're doing with facial recognition tools. They're giving them to the government to have access to the most advanced technology to keep citizens safe. I've said this a million times, but safety, you're increasing your safety always leads to decreasing your freedoms. And that's the real goal, decreasing your freedoms. They don't care about safety, really. This pandemic emergency procedures is not about your safety. Locking you in your home is not about your safety. It's not safe to be locked in your home. It's not safe to be prevented from exercising outside. It's not safe to destroy the economies of the world. It's not about safety. Safety is the excuse. It's the excuse to eliminate your freedoms. This is where they're really going with this. Let's read on. In a 2019 interview with PBS Frontline, Jassy indicated he was aware of the potential for AWS technology to be abused. Of course he's aware with it. He's busy building it for that. Let's read on. If there's any kind of documented proof of people misusing technology, we will suspend people's ability not just to use the technology, but to use AWS. And who did they suspend? Not the people who are tracking every single move you make, developing facial recognition tools so that they can find out everything about you. Not the people who are putting devices in your living room called Amazon, whatever the heck it is, Alerta, or I can't even remember the name of it, to listen to every single word you say. No, they're not taking care of those forms of abuses. They canceled Parler, kicked Parler right off, for Parler didn't do what Amazon told them to do. That is Parler's mistake. Amazon didn't do as they were told. And they made up this excuse that Parler somehow, well, we'll get onto it. I think it comes out in this article here. You know the story of Parler. They claim that this little incident on Capitol was that Parler played a big role in that and therefore had to be canceled. They canceled Parler. So he said he was addressing the concerns about law enforcement's use of facial recognition. And we know we could put all of our trust in law enforcement, can't we? This is what the left wants us to do. Everybody give up their guns and 100% trust the police and give the police guns and pepper sprays and batons and protective equipment so that the police don't get hurt by all of us people with bare hands. Let's read on. The company followed through on sentiment last month, suspending cloud services to social media platform Parler. I can't believe that Parler was the biggest danger going on Amazon Web Services. Can you? I can't. But Parler is a risk to suppressing free speech because Parler does not want to control speech. And I applaud them for it, but they're dead. They're dead now. So let's read on. For failing to moderate content that advocated violence after Parler was used by rioters who stormed the Capitol. Now, remember that the section, I think it's 222 or something, somebody correct me on this, 122 or 120, says that was deliberately written to give social media platforms protection from being prosecuted for what happens on their platforms. That was given to them on the basis that they are not, in fact, publishers. They fought, Trump wanted to cancel that because they're acting like publishers. Trump was right. When Amazon tells Parler that they have to moderate content, they're acting as a publisher, an editor. and yet they still have protection from prosecution according from material that they have on their social media platforms. So they have it both ways. They have their cake and they're eating it too. They're protected from being sued, and yet they are dictating what people can say on the platform, thus acting as a publisher and an editor. Section 230 is what Your Dog's News is saying there. Thank you for bringing that up, and Justin Mears pointing that out as well. So let's move on. In October, Amazon said the virus had infected 20,000 U.S. frontline employees, including grocery workers at Amazon-owned Whole Foods Market. I find this interesting too, and I think you will as well, because there's a pattern here, if we haven't noticed. The same people are coming up to be into critical roles that they're taking for themselves on everything about our human lives. Amazon is getting into the grocery market. I didn't realize they already owned Whole Foods markets. Now, that's in the US, and there's more. Keep in mind, who is the largest single landowner of farmland in the US? Bill Gates, one of the elite in Bezos's club. Bill Gates owns the majority of farmland in the US, and Bezos is going to dominate the grocery store business in the US, or at least Amazon is. Everything is being taken under their control. Let's read on here. This is from CNBC. This is last August when Amazon took a next step. Amazon expands grocery business beyond Whole Foods with first fresh store in Los Angeles. First, just a start. Between the elite, very few elites, a very small number of them, are taking over the fundamental needs of the entire world. Amazon is opening the first location of its new chain of grocery stores, which are designed to court a different set of customers than Whole Foods shoppers. So they got Whole Foods. These people know they're going to control the whole food supply. Bill Gates has the farmland. Jeff Bezos has the grocery stores and the transportation networks from Amazon's distribution. What's his name? Warren Buffett owns the railroad. It's a very small number of people that are taking ownership of absolutely everything. Forbes, this is in February 22nd. Here's what's next for Jeff Bezos after he steps down as Amazon CEO. Reading from the top. He also said he'll work on the Bezos Earth Fund, which he kicked off a year ago with a $10 billion pledge, almost 10% of his net worth at the time, to combat climate change by issuing grants to scientists, activists, NGOs. Any effort that offers a real possibility to help preserve and protect the natural world. All sounds gloriful, doesn't it? Except that none of them talk about the lithium mines for batteries, or the pollution from the windmills, or the completely ineffective, completely impossible nature of electricity to take over oil. But it's to combat climate change. And notice the climate change issue is the same issue being pushed up by all of the leftists, all of them. Bezos is going to put his attention there. By issuing grants to scientists, activists, and NGOs, any effort that offers real possibility to help and protect the natural world. The billionaire said he'll also dedicate more time to the Washington Post, which he purchased for $250 million, pocket change for him, in 2013, and helped to expand its digital presence and ramp up revenue. And the Washington Post is an entirely liberal, or rather lefty. You can't call them liberals. Lefties are not liberal. There is no liberalness in lefties. Let's get that straight. Liberalness is the left. They drove liberal sentiments, liberal philosophy out of their movement a long time ago. They are totalitarian. The Washington Post is a lefty organization. And lo and behold, Jeff Bezos is going to put a lot of his time on the propaganda coming from the Washington Post. Now, why would that be so important to him? Why is propaganda from the left so important to Jeff Bezos? You have to keep the people pushing for globalism. And this is in the Associated Press also reporting on this yesterday. In a blog post to employees, Bezos said he planned to focus on new products and early initiatives being developed at Amazon. He said he would have more time for side projects, including his space exploration company, Blue Origin, his philanthropic initiatives, and overseeing the Washington Post, which he owns. Reading onwards. Bill Gates, who was Microsoft's CEO in 2000 until 2000, kept a day-to-day role at the company until 2008 and served as its chairman until 2014. Gates left the board entirely last year to focus on philanthropy. This was written a while ago, I think, was it? When was this written? It doesn't say. Uh-oh. Gotten this back again. Try this. Okay. Bill Gates isn't focusing on philanthropy, folks. His Bill Gates Foundation has nothing to do with helping people. He has more power and control and influence over the world than he ever did now. It's a business hiding behind a not-for-profit status. Calling it philanthropy is ridiculous. And the same thing goes for Bezos. These people are strategic thinkers. They're after total control of the entire world. They are not after improving poor people's or regular people's lives. Quite the opposite. The elite in every stage of our societies have always hated the middle class. They want a work class and an elite ruling class, and they don't really want anything in between. Let's read what the Independent, and this was in Spanish, but it's translated to English here. The Independent said, "As CEO, I will continue to participate in important Amazon initiatives, but I will also have time and energy I need to focus on the Day One Fund, Bezos Earth Fund, Blue Origin, the Washington Post, and my other passions." I think that's kind of repetitive, but here is Blue Origin. I didn't know this, but Bezos has been created Blue Origin, a space exploration or rocket company and space travel company, before Elon Musk created SpaceX. So he's been at it longer, but it's been a private affair. Both these guys want to get into space. Now, let's get through some of this first. Here's Jeff Bezos' idea. Millions of people living and working in space. Blue's vision is a future where millions of people are living and working in space in order to preserve Earth. Nice word there, huh? Preserve Earth. They're always casting themselves in the role of saviors, almost godlike people. And a huge number of people believe this. Anyways, our home. For our grandchildren's grandchildren, we must go to space to tap its unlimited resources and energy. If we can lower the cost of access to space with reusable launch vehicles, we can all enable this dynamic future for humanity. Well, I'm pro-space travel, actually. I think human beings will get off the Earth. But I don't like being sold this bill of goods as if it's for all of humanity. It's not for all of humanity. It's for the elite, and only the elite. Their bringing the one world government together maximizes their ability to put resources towards these projects to take the elite into space, not you and I. And a world of nation states gets in their way in every single every single analysis of the issue. Nation states block their goals. This is why, one of the reasons they want a one world government. They see themselves as emperors, and they want to maximize these resources to put towards these kinds of projects here. Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos have profound visions for humanity's future in space. Here's how the billionaires compare. This is a year and a half ago, coming up on 2 years ago. The Insider, Business Insider. Meanwhile, I should have reversed these. I'm going to skip to the next one first and read that. Musk, the tech mogul behind Tesla and the founder of SpaceX, a now $33 billion rocket company, wants to establish a permanent self-sustaining city on Mars. Bezos, on the other hand, CEO of Amazon, has his own space company, Blue Origin. Its work so far focuses on building a road to space with new rockets that could ultimately pave the way to floating colonies. Okay. Now, here we'll go through just a couple of slides, because I don't know the details of where they're going, but their long-term vision of these super elites is heading out into space. And it's a good long-term vision in a lot of ways. I think, well, good or bad, I don't know how it will all plan out, but I think it is an inevitable development. And I don't even think we'd want to stop it. The question is, what are they going to do to us? What are they willing to do to us regular people who are going to be living our lives out and our grandchildren's lives and great forever and ever on the planet Earth, who are never going to be leaving this planet Earth? What are their plans for us? What role do they see for us staying here as citizens of Earth? And what it seems clear to me is that they see us as the class of work slaves. They don't want us enjoying, participating in the fruits of our labors so much. They want all the fruits of the labors put towards their space projects. And of course, while they're on Earth, they are emperors. They will be wealthy beyond understanding, and they will have their space colonies to retreat to as a fortress that cannot be surmounted, that cannot be broken down. But let's look forward on, because we are going to go to space one day. But the issue I have about these projects is that they're deceiving the regular people of the world into thinking this is going to benefit all of us. No, we have to be careful that we still have a free and fruitful life available here on Earth for regular people. They don't want that for us. They want us as work slaves. And I covered that in the video, Feminism's Role in a One World Government and What We Can Do About It. Reading from the top. Bezos, has long been preoccupied with space colonies. In particular, he has expressed interest in the concepts imagined by physicist Gerard O'Neill in the late 60s and 70s. O'Neill's colonies would be made almost entirely out of materials harvested in space. They would rotate to make artificial gravity and recreate Earth-like conditions inside. I read a good book, a sci-fi book on this when I was in university, I think it was. It was Wheel World, I think it was, or something like this. And the space colony was a big, giant rotating wheel. I don't remember who the author, it might have been one of these authors here. Let's read onwards. Musk has described his vision for humanity's future in space in perhaps more detail than Bezos has. Musk's core goal is to, quote, back up our Earth-based civilization on Mars. Why would he feel a need to back up on Mars? That's just curious, because clearly he does not like the future he sees and participates in creating for the original Earth. Reading onwards. Musk thinks starships could ferry 100 people at a time. He has said the cost of a round-trip ticket to Mars could be about $100,000 to $500,000. That price would be low enough that most people in advanced economies could sell their home on Earth and move to Mars if they want. Who are they leaving on Earth? The work slave population. That's how they see us. We are human resources to the wealthy. And their one world government, socialist one world government, with them pulling all the strings, if we're not careful, we will lose all of our freedoms. Let's read on. Either way, Musk hopes to establish the first self-sustainable city on Mars by the 2050s. It's quite an ambition. I certainly wouldn't say impossible, because just in my lifetime, the kinds of improvements, and I mean, just look at these phones here. We all have one of these phones. You know, the technology, that development just in phone technologies over the last 20 years is incredible. Can they make that happen? I don't know. Maybe. But I'd say we've been surprised an awful lot of times at how fast technology can move. If Blue Origin can make launches cheap, mine the moon for fuel, harvest asteroids for metals and minerals, and generate energy in space, it may be possible to construct space colonies and move people off the planet. Now, just as a back of the envelope calculation, how many people do you think they can move off the planet? And if they move all the really important people, wealthy people, people of powerful control, off the planet, what would they be willing to do to the planet and the remaining people on the planet should they need more stuff for themselves? Well, history shows us that totalitarian leaders will slaughter all of their own people if it serves their own interest. They're moving people off the planet. They're not moving regular people off the planet. They're moving the super wealthy, the super rich, the super powerful, the super talented. I don't think they care what, I don't think, if push came to shove and they needed stuff from planet Earth at our expense, those of us who remain here, just what wouldn't they do to the remaining people? Because they will have all the power. They will have all the power on Earth and off of Earth. Well, as John's Guitar Barn says, it's a fantasy. It might be a fantasy, but it's a fantasy that they're putting a lot of money into. Let's hope it's a fantasy in some ways, but I think we will be going off the planet. And what concerns me is just how much they are willing to make us suffer to achieve this goal. How much power do they need to achieve this goal? They need all the resources of the earth put towards this goal that they want. This is maybe one of the reasons why they want a one world government, to give them control to extract as much resources as possible and to put it through this goal. It's a possible explanation. But even without going off the planet, they still want to be the elite, most powerful people on Earth under a one world government. So that is all I've got to say for today. Thank you for joining me. And obviously this SpaceX and Blue Origin segment is pure speculation, but it certainly fits a pattern. It fits a pattern of the elite have a goal, and they're very, very smart at finding and pulling together the resources to make that goal happen. At the same time as these Blue Origin and SpaceX are pursuing the off-planet living for human beings, at the very same time they're pursuing that, they're pursuing a one-world government. They're pursuing stakeholder capitalism, which is fascism. They're pursuing a one-world government with them at all the controls. They're saying that the people in the Western world will have to accept a lowered standard of living. They're doing it. They're creating the Great Reset, and they're pursuing this at the same time. Are they connected? I don't know. But it's better to speculate than to close your eyes and stick your head in the sand. So with that, that's all I've got to say today, folks. Thank you for joining me on Studio Burlet, and please tune in later this week for another session with Coffee with Steve. And as I remind everybody every session, do something you love today and every day. If you don't have something to love, find something you love to do and do it. Because this is your life, no matter what is going on. And this has gotten me through lots of hard times. Every single day, do something you love to do because you love to do it. So with that, I'm signing off. And once again, thank you for joining me on Coffee with Steve.